All right, Shalom. First off, I want to give all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahasham, Yahweh Shah, Bahasham Kakadash. I want to give double honors to the apostles, the bishops, and elders of Great Millstone. And a sincere Shalom to all the Akim out here that's doing and pushing his work in truth and in sincerity. I want to go on this video that you have to have a healthy form of semantics or healthy understanding of semantics in order to know the Bible. Okay? And when we go into the word semantics, okay, it says, is the branch, this is the definition, is the branch of linguistics and logic concerned with the study of meaning and language, covering the interpretation of words, phrases, and sentences. It says it explores how words signify concepts, the relationships between words, and how meaning is constructed or altered by context. Okay? And you have I'm gonna get the etymology of this word as well. Okay? Which the etymology of the word semantic is relating to the significance or meaning. Okay? It says the psychology of language. From the Greek semantikos, significant, to show by sign, to signify, to point out, to indicate by a sign, to sign, mark, token, omen, portent. It says constellation, grave. Okay, to see, look, he meditates. Then it says the word has tended to become loose in application. Okay? And one of the ways of how it became loose, is when somebody, they'll say, oh, this guy's getting into semantics, right? One of the reasons why people get into, why that is being said about certain things, okay, is because, some people, in certain cases, they take things personal. When somebody could be speaking in general, okay? You can say, man, y'all crazy. And somebody, who wasn't even around could just say, you talking about me? And it's like, you say, no, I wasn't talking about you, but you said y'all, and that's a form of, getting into semantics because, this person is hanging on one word, okay? And not looking at the reason why, the person said it, okay? You can say, yeah, these people was acting crazy, that's why you said it, and this person that thinks he wasn't acting crazy because he wasn't, they'd be like, yo, yeah, I wasn't talking about you. So it's kind of like a, if the shoe fits, wear it type of thing. And some people, they want to, they want to make it where they think that they wearing a shoe, And it's like, it doesn't apply to you, okay? As it's saying, if it don't apply, let it fly, okay? But when we talk about the linguistics, okay, the language, there's many different languages, okay, and there's many different things and ways of how certain people say certain things, right? Like in Baltimore, right, they use the term dummy, which, is odd to me because I didn't grow up calling, people, my homeboys and stuff like that, dummy, they'll say, hey, dummy, it'd be like, well, why are you calling me a dummy? But this is one of the, the ways of how people speak. Okay? Out here in Baltimore. It's like Baltimore got their own way of speaking anyway. It's like you don't even know how they what these people be saying sometimes. But it says the logic, because some of these people are using that term dummy, okay? Not in I don't know if they saying it, because they actually think that you're a dummy. That could very well be the case, you got the word, for example, nigga, right? Some people don't like to be called nigga, right? Some Jake don't like to be called nigga, right? But, it's been used as a term of endearment, and when you go into the scriptures, it was a guy named Niger. Okay. So, when we go into, the semantics, okay, the language and the logic behind, what's being said, okay, you got to understand that in order to be able to, because right here it says covering the interpretation of words, and the prophet is supposed to be an interpreter, okay, to break down what was being said. And inside of the scriptures, it's semantics, okay, in a lot of different forms. One of the forms of semantics, right, is Joel 2:28, and it says, "And it shall come to pass afterward that I will pour out my spirit upon all flesh." That word "all," if somebody looks at that word, you would think that it's talking about literally any and everybody that's on the planet. Okay? All is called, okay, in the Hebrew. It says all, the whole of, any, each, every, anything, totality. Okay? So you would think that this scripture is talking about any and everybody. Okay? Because the word all is used in this phrase, right? Which, we just said any and everybody, right? But who is this talking about? Because it's not talking about everybody in the world. Okay? It says, "And your sons and your daughters shall prophesy." So another one, right? Some people don't got children. Okay? So is that talking about, people who don't have children, they gonna, no, that's not talking about that. Okay? It says, "Your old men shall dream dreams, your young men shall see visions." And in this scripture, right, this is only talking about the Israelites. Okay? You got, these Christians, they read one word in the scriptures, and next thing you know, they think that they automatically understand all the scriptures, but they don't, go deep into the context Okay? They don't go deep. They only go surface level. You can't go surface level. Okay? You can't go surface level with these scriptures, man. Okay? Christians barely even scratch the surface. Okay? That's why the scriptures say, study to show thyself approved. Okay? Now, it said, I asked, who is the all flesh in Joel according to Great Millstone? Right? According to the teachings commonly associated with the organization Great Millstone, the phrase all flesh in the book of Joel 2:28, I will pour out my spirit upon all flesh, is usually not interpreted as meaning every human being on earth without distinction. Okay? They generally teach that all flesh refers to Israelites scattered among different nations, classes, ages, and conditions of life. Okay? Men and women within Israel, young and old servants, handmaids, among the elect and believers. They often connect this passage with the book of Acts, where the Spirit is poured out at Pentecost, right? You got in Pentecost, in that time, it says Jews out of every nation. Okay? Christians don't even know who the real Jews are. Okay? What a Jew is. Where did Jew come from? Okay? Jew, you had 3 tribes at the time. Okay? Judah, Benjamin, and Levi. Okay? So Jew was a broad term back then. Okay? And even still is still considered like a broad term today. Right? But Jew is short for, Judah, Benjamin, and Levi. So you got to be able to go deep into that word to understand it. Now, Jew comes from Judah, okay? Because Judah is the head tribe, okay? Just like when you see Ephraim, okay, in the scriptures, Ephraim represents, the tribe of Ephraim, but it also represents the northern tribe as well in certain instances. So you got to be able to understand that. Heck, you got the kingdom of Israel, right? Which the kingdom of Israel represents, the tribes that came over here, the northern kingdom. Okay? Because they considered themselves to be, Israelites, yes. But they, the Jews was like, they're going off, but the kingdom of Israel and Jews was going at it, even though that they all Israelites. Okay? So one sect is saying, we're the kingdom of Israel, and another sect is saying we're the kingdom of Israel as well. We're the kingdom of the Jews. Okay, so there was a split. It says prophecies about the restoration of Israel, because that's all the scriptures is about, man. Okay? The restoration of the Israelites. Okay? The idea that the truth spirit would be given broadly among the Israelites in the last days, not only to prophets or kings. Okay? In many GMS style breakdowns, they contrast all flesh with a strictly universal interpretation and argue it means all kinds or all categories within Israel. Similar to how some biblical phrases use all in a covenant context rather than meaning every individual on earth. Okay. It says they may also point to the immediate context of Joel speaking to Israel, Judah, as support for that interpretation. Okay. Now I understood about, the semantics. I could put my finger on that, about, that's what it was actually called, but as I, asked that, question to ChatGPT, it was like, okay, yeah, you can't just loosely use that, word, or you use the semantics, because, we got to be able to get past the surface level of the word that, that we talking about, and apply it in a proper context. Okay. And certain people, you can read the scriptures, read it to them, but if it's hid to them, they're not going to get it. Okay? They're not going to get, because they can't get past certain words. They can't get past, some people can't get past Jesus. Well, his name is written in there, so it got to be Jesus. It is like, hold on. The letter J didn't exist, like 400 something years ago, right? Jesus isn't a Hebrew name, okay? And your name stays the same in different languages. There's many different points on that, man, okay? But that's one of the things that people do, they look at a word that's inside of the scriptures and they just, they run it. They take that word and they run with it, okay? Like where it talks about, Gentiles, nations, we'll touch on that as well, okay? But the word, it says what you're describing is usually called a figure of speech involving contextual or idiomatic use of all. Not, it says, more specifically, this kind of interpretation is described as semantic range. A word or phrase can have a range of meanings depending on context. And in this example of Joel, this is a phrase that has different different range. Okay? It's just that Joel didn't say, he was pour out his spirit upon all, Israelites. Okay? He probably did but the scriptures was translated. Okay? And when you translate it from one language to another, certain things get left out. Okay? You gotta know that at that time when Joel said that in the Old Testament, that, they wasn't thinking about, all nations could be saved. Heck, even in the New Testament, they wasn't thinking about all nations could be saved. At no point. Okay? It's only Israelites. And as we read, Israelites are scattered throughout all the nations. Okay? So therefore, Israelites can look like many different nations. Okay? You gotta get past the surface level on the skin color. Okay? And some people, they can't get past the surface level. Okay? So it says contextual qualifier, the surrounding context limits what all means. It says synecdoche. Sometimes all refers to a representative group rather than every single individual. Okay, so these are all different type of, interpretations, right? And these are words that people don't use in their everyday life. Okay, so we could look up that word synecdoches, right? I don't know how you say it. Okay, hyperbolic. Okay, general language, right? It says all can mean all kinds, many, or people throughout the groups being discussed. Okay, now let's get this word synecdoche. A figure of speech where a part of something is used to represent the whole, or the whole is used to represent a part. Okay, it creates a vivid, concise imagery by substituting a related term, such as hired hands for workers or wheels for a car. Okay, you got those wheels, you got the wheels. Okay, it's not just talking about, you got 4 tires. But some people, they think that way. It says part for a whole, right? I need a hand. Needing help from a whole person. Okay. It says part for a whole. The suits in the conference room. Suits represents business people. Okay. Whole for a part. The world is too much with us. The world stands for modern human society. Okay. So this language that we use, man, this American language, English, okay, which is not you don't even come from America, okay, but the language that we use in America, okay, it's confusing, okay, and the Bible calls America Babylon the Great, okay. Babylon means confusion, okay. So going on, continuing, it says all the world came to buy grain from Joseph, and Book of Genesis doesn't literally mean every human on earth. Okay, all Judea went out of John, and Gospel of Mark doesn't mean every single person without exception. Okay, it says so the specific idea would be all being used in a context limited or representative sense rather than an absolute universal sense. Okay? In biblical interpretation, this is often discussed under hermeneutics, semantic scope, universal or limited language. You also got that word universalism. Okay? Collective, generalized language. Okay? It says, here are examples from scripture where words like all, world, or broad group terms are used in context limited or representative sense rather than meaning every single individual on earth. All, usually contextually, all countries came into Egypt, right? It says in Book of Genesis 41 and 57, and all countries came into Egypt to Joseph to buy corn. This doesn't necessarily mean every nation and every person on the planet. It means people from many surrounding lands, regions affected by the famine. Okay? All Judea. And there went out unto him all the land of Judea. There's Mark 1 and 5. I said the word, Gentiles, right? I says the word Gentiles itself can have a semantic range depending on the context, right? The Greek word ethnos can mean nations, heathens, non-Israelites, or sometimes Israelites scattered among the nations. So the word Gentile can mean an Israelite, but it also can mean a heathen. Okay? And any Israelite that doesn't, follow or know that they are an Israelite, okay, they're in a heathen state of mind. And we, sometimes use the example of, the Lion King, when Simba, he knew he was a lion at first and then, as a baby, but he grew up, not knowing that he was a lion until he was told that he was a lion, okay? And hanging around, animals that he should be eating, as a lion, okay? So until he was told that he was a lion, now he, got the proper mindset, okay? And that's the way that our people are nowadays. They don't know that they, that they are, lions, if you want to call it that, they or Israelites, they acting like, black, American, Latino, okay? So, the word Gentile could mean heathen, right? But then you also got that word nation, right? And I says, is nations a semantic word, right? It says, yes, nations can function as a word with a broad semantic range. Meaning is exact meaning depends on context, okay? For example, in the scripture, the term nations, goyim, right, in Greek, ethnos, right, can refer to foreign people, non-Israelite nations, all political nations generally. It says tribes or people, Gentiles / heathen. It says sometimes even Israel itself is a nation. So when the Lord said, go and teach all nations, he's talking about Israel. You got to apply it in the proper context. Okay? But some people, especially Christians, you see it says all nations. Yeah, because you don't go deep, man. And it's not given unto y'all to understand. Okay? You got to be able to decode these scriptures. Okay? You can't, if you want to read the Bible front to back, if it's not meant for you, it's not meant for you, But, if you read the Bible all the way through, I remember when I was younger, very young, 12, 11 years old, reading the Bible all the way through. And I, it was like, those children of Israel are special. They're special people, And I was like, am I a Gentile at 11, 12 years old? So the word nation, okay, can be used out of context. Okay? It says nations has a broad semantic range and can carry different meanings depending on context. This is similar to words like world, brother, law, flesh, Gentiles, where context determines the intended meaning. Okay? So, what more can you say, man? Lord willing, this is edifying. Want to say shalom till next time.